Hey, welcome back to Wiring 101. So, still working on the St. Regis and got some of the old wiring out. You probably remember that big pile of crappy wires that was on the floor. It was a real rat's nest. Wires that went to nowhere, other wires that were tacked onto yet other wires that went to nowhere. So, they were using some pretty bad practices in this car. I'll show you some of the stuff we got here. This is known as an add-a circuit or a I don't know, Scotch lock. They got a ton of different names. And how this little guy works is that little aluminum plate in there, when you squeeze it together, it pierces the insulation on the wires, but a lot of times it can actually pierce the wire and cut it. So I looked at a couple of them that were in the car and I could see where the strands were in fact cut. So took everything out, started from scratch, took out all the aftermarket wiring that was in the car. Attacked the vehicle wiring, cut everything that looked like it had a problem, braided it, made a nice braid for a good mechanical connection, and then we soldered it for a good electrical connection. Doing that makes it almost like a brand new wire. Then heat shrink and some of that moisture proof heat shrink with the glue in it, and that's all 100% now. The vehicle's set. So getting back into some of the police wiring and the aftermarket stuff that I'd seen done on this car. This is one of my favorites. If you're putting together two wires in a car, don't do this. Don't ever do this. Because if that gets hot, the wires sometimes don't make a good connection. It gets hot. No amount of tape is going to save that. It's going to melt and it's going to start a car fire. So don't do it. That's one of my favorites. That's gone. This is my other favorite. Ooh. Homemade fuse panel. Yeah, no protection, no fusing going into it, which is ironic because it's a fuse panel. And so this was mounted on the heater box in the passenger compartment. Wires constantly getting kicked out of it. They fall together and short out. So this was a disastrous car fire waiting to happen. That's gone. On-off switch for the siren. Yeah, siren draws, I don't know, a fair amount of amperage. This is good for about 2 amps. So as you can see, it's half melted. That's gone. This is a cool switch. This is a vintage on-off switch. It'll take a lot of amperage, right? In and out, on-off, very simple. Nice switch, but everything in the car was connected to that switch, all the emergency lighting. So you pull the switch, alternating headlights, grill lights, deck lights, everything came on. You had no selectability. It's on, it's off, that's it. And I'm kind of thinking it was almost at its maximum amperage to start with. So that all came out as well. So I'll show you kind of where we are today. I didn't get a chance to finish up. I had some company yesterday come over, and then we went out to see Dashboard Anthem down at Frog Alley. That was an awesome night. But here, I'll spin you around. Don't get dizzy. This is what we've got, and instead of being down in the passenger compartment in the kick panels like over there where you can hit it, it's up behind the dash. So this is all going to be protected. I've also put, a screening over it so that if you're up there working, you're not going to hit it and accidentally short something out. Just basically safety, 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 safety. Everything's labeled, as you can see. I put proper labels on everything so we know what goes where. Wires are all neatly cleaned up and tied up, so that way, it's, if we do have to get to something, we can easily find it. Relocated the siren, the undercover siren, because that was over the brake pedal originally. So there were times you let off the brake pedal, the brake lights would stay on because it was hit the box and not release fully. That's not dangerous, huh? So here's our switch box and the wiring to it. And I've got some covering for that. I have a couple extra wires I still have to put in. So I'm gonna put the covering on when it's done. All of the wires are here. They're all labeled. I just have to connect them to our cool little switch box here. And this is a switch box you see in most cop cars, and gives you selectability, little LED to tell us which ones are on, and the legends will go down here when I figure out who's gonna do what. It's gonna be like alternating headlights, grill lights, deck lights, maybe the siren on the end, so that way we're not using that cheesy switch. These first 3 are wired through heavy duty relays because, you know, if you get a light bar that draws 20 some amps or more, this switch isn't going to take it. So the low amperage switch, the relay coil, only takes about an amp. So this is more than enough switch to fire the coil. And then the relay passes the 12 volts at the higher amperage, and that relay is wired through a, you know, fuse out to the battery. That way, you know, we have the proper fusing going out to the light bar if we decide to put it on. I like the undercover look of this car, so I'm wiring it for if I want to go that route. I'm doing all the wiring now. That way I have it, I don't have to rewire anything. Everything is in place. So this is coming along nicely. Redid all the wiring for the stereo, out to the speakers, and down to the block and the fuse panel, so that is all new. Gotta get my knobs put back on. This little courtesy light's pretty cool. Now this was in the car, but it wasn't wired, and there's no connector. I don't know if they cut the wiring out or it just didn't have it, but when you pull the switch, there's 3 wires. The center wire goes direct to battery. When you pull it this way, it completes the ground circuit going directly to the chassis, and the light comes on. So this is your manual control. You can turn the light on anytime you want, and, you know, just flip the switch. When you throw the switch back, the 3rd wire actually comes down to the pin switch, and I had to run it down here and connect it. And that switch, when you open the door, that switch goes to ground, turns on the overhead light, the dome light, and the courtesy light, the map light. So that's kind of cool. It's just a little extra lighting when you're getting in and out of the car. And you know, when you close the door, obviously it goes out. The police light is very similar. If you throw the switch one way, it manually turns it on. The other way, it works with the pin switch. So I tried to emulate as much of the factory functions as I could. The lower panel, this is what's going to hide that connector block. This will all be put back in place, and I had to refurbish it because it had so many holes cut in it and it was in such bad shape that it needed a new face. So I refurbished it, I made a new face for it, and I put the original trunk release button back in the factory place. I know it's factory because factory wiring for it's still here. So that was pretty cool. Underneath that is a bracket with something called a fast idle lock or throttle lock. Excuse me. And that throttle lock hasn't worked in a long time. I don't think it's ever worked, according to my friend. So what I did was I took it all apart, and how this thing is supposed to work is you're supposed to be able to, there's a special bracket that's on the gas pedal, and this connector goes to it. You have a stop, and this little stop is what dictates, you know, how far the cable can travel and how high the RPM is going to be. And this mounts under the dash, and what happens is you step on the gas, you pull this out, you know, as far as you have the set stop for, and then you give it a twist, and it stays locked in place, and that keeps your throttle at whatever RPM you have it set for. And they would do this because at idle, with the lights on, all the lights, light bar, everything going, it would run down the battery faster than the alternator could charge it. So they would run up the throttle a little bit, and that would keep the idle going, and that would keep the alternator running all of the lights, and the battery wouldn't die off. Some guys used it for, you know, just warming up the car in the morning. But, you know, it stays stuck, and then you turn it, and it goes in and out. And that's how you set it. Do not, please, use this as a cruise control. I've seen people set these things pretty far back, come out and crank it, and they're going up the Northway, and that's their, you know, I guess you call it manual cruise control. Yeah, don't do that. Please, God, don't do that. So that's where we are with the car right now, and you can see we've got a lot going on the bench in regards to this. I've got to finish up the wiring. I've got everything coming out through the firewall, through one of the original grommets. We've got our alternating headlight flasher. I've got to get that mounted and just make sure the wiring, I want to get rid of, again, I found another one. This has got to go away. And then the rest of the wiring for the battery, the police package wiring. This is the fuse panel I talked about earlier. So it's a vintage, you know, about the right time period fuse panel. And that'll take care of the police wiring as far as that goes. And as soon as I get that done, I'll show you what everything kind of looks like. Then it's back to some mechanical work. Found the original radiator. Owner, John, still had it. So I called him up to shoot me that radiator. I'll get it recorded, get it all refurbished. We'll put the factory radiator back in, all new. And a couple other little things. Oh, this was hilarious. I'll do a video on this later, but I pulled the valve covers just to kind of check the lash on the valves. And the valve seals are gone. I don't mean gone as in bad. I mean 2 of them are completely missing. How does this happen? I don't know. I don't know if they got chewed up in the drivetrain. Maybe they didn't get reinstalled at the last engine rebuild, but I've noticed it gets a little puff of smoke after she warms up and the oil thins out. Well, yeah, it's running down the valve stem into the cylinder and getting burned off. So definitely a set of umbrella seals are slated very quickly for this car. And I think that really is going to wrap up 99% of it for now. I think it's just going to be a summer of driving it and having some fun with it, just enjoying it. And, you know, we'll work it out and see what other things need to be done. That's always the point of driving these things. And, you know, you always find something later. I'm sure it's going to probably need brakes at some point. I know springs are going to be in the future pretty soon here. You can see it's got a little squat in the tail end. And it had those shocks with the springs on them. Somebody was trying to compensate, so that's never a good idea. You want proper handling. We'll get this thing just squared right away. And that's getting down to it, you know. Everything inside is in great condition, less the seat. That's, you know, reupholstery is in the future for it too. So just one piece at a time, and you stay tuned, and we'll have some more fun with the car. Okay, talk to you later.